Hey reader, welcome back here to the channel, and today we are looking at the 7th place nation. We are officially in the top third. And at this point, pretty much everything you're looking at, quality stuff. Whatever these guys offer, they're going to offer you high-end, high-quality things in basically every category. And any list that you're making, you will be going from really weighing things that are good to things that are great to things that are excellent. Okay? And so, leading us off into that pack, we have France. And probably not surprising when you think about it. France was on the forefront of a lot of tank ingenuity, invention, and design coming out of World War I and going into World War II. Their infantry and armies, just in general, had quite a bit of veterancy going into World War II, as French Foreign Legion had been quite active in the 1920s and the 1930s. They fought in a lot of different arenas. They tested out a lot of stuff. We even got the arrival of camouflage from these guys. So it's not particularly surprising that they would appear high. As we look at their special rules, they have three that are in the book, all of which are a mix of doesn't really matter to could potentially be good, depending on how you use them. And so with communications breakdown, we've talked about this before on some of the previous videos as well. We'll talk about it one more time in this series as we wrap up the end of second edition study. But in this case, it honestly is something that never really came up. In this case, the rule is basically just that if you have the first order dice and it's pulled on turn one, then your opponent can choose to throw it back in and have you redraw, right? And this means that roughly half the time, assuming that you and your opponent have roughly equal order dice, half the time his dice is going to be drawn first turn, so it doesn't come up, so it doesn't hurt you. And secondly, even if your dice is drawn, you throw it back in and you draw it again. So if you go for a really high order dice count, you have the exact same odds of getting yours drawn again, right? And even if that doesn't happen, there are very few situations on turn one when the armies are relatively far apart where not having the first draw is going to hurt you. And even more so, if this is a first wave sort of thing, you might actually not want the first draw. You might want your opponent to get it. So in that sense, communications breakdown, it's kind of a non-thing. It's a null. It doesn't really change anything one way or the other. French forward artillery doctrine is fantastic. It gives you a free inexperienced or regular, aka regular, artillery or AT gun, either light or medium for both of these. And I think you should go with a medium artillery asterisk basically every time. And the asterisk is there is a strategy that says you take a medium anti-tank gun. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, especially when we start getting to third edition. Then as we look at the hurriedly conscripted reserves, it says that basically if you take 3 or more inexperienced infantry sections, which in the original book was just the inexperienced infantry section, rifle section, but then over time, as you got to Battle of France and stuff like that, you got a couple of other extra sections that had inexperienced stuff. There's like an NCO cadet squad. There's a Navy Melanais squad. So, basically naval shipmen that were brought to land to fight because that's where the fight was needed, right? You weren't needed on a boat. You were needed on the ground. But in general, I would assume it's probably going to be the inexperienced infantrymen as a general rule. But the rule here is actually very interesting. It just says if you take 3 or more, you get an additional one for free that's equal in cost and equipment to the cheapest one. So, you can't take like one full man squad with an LMG and and a VB launcher, and then take 2 like little 5-man squads and get another one that's at full strength with the the LMG and the VB launcher. You get just another 5-man squad. But hey, it's another way to get free stuff, which is always nice. And then they kind of have a secret special rule in that they get access to the VB launcher. This is relatively rare. It is a slightly shorter range, but also shorter minimum range light mortar, and can be put in a lot of different infantry sections. So if you like high explosive damage, and if you like light mortars, then you will like this. I do not like light mortars, as evidenced in the very first video that I posted other than the channel intro video. More on that there. It's fine if you like them. That's great. They have options for them. If you don't like them, whatever. I don't tend to make my points back when using VB launchers. They are cheaper than light mortars in second edition, which is kind of nice. But hey, if you like them, there you go. You've got them. In terms of headquarters, honestly, it's just normal stuff. You get inexperienced through veteran officers at all levels. You get access to the air observer and the artillery observer at regular and veteran. And your medics are great because you do get access to the regular medic instead of having to pay for a veteran one. No specialized officers means that, hey, if you like the options, you can take them. In the second edition French army, there really was not a lot of reason to take forward observers, both because air observers were quite dangerous and artillery observers were, they were fine, but you were paying as much as you would for a medium artillery gun that can fire for 6 turns potentially instead of a one-time shot that can maybe try to pin several people all at once. So like, while there's technically room for why one might take a forward observer, in most cases, it's just a pass, and that's fine. For the infantry, they're actually really good. Your inexperienced infantry are great because you get access to a VB launcher or an LMG. If I had to choose between those two in second edition, I'd probably choose the VB launcher. Honestly, you might get more work out of it. But you could take one man who had a pistol. So in an inexperienced squad, that's a 4-point dude who's not completely unarmed, which is fantastic. It also means that since you have to have a loader for things like a VB launcher, well, actually, I don't think the VB launcher requires a loader, but between the VB launcher and the LMG, since you have to have a loader in there somewhere, it's nice to be able to just save points on the loader, right? You're not paying for a full dude with a rifle because he's not going to do the job of a rifleman. And since pistols had assault and tough fighters, therefore in close quarters, if people tried to come at the squad, you were actually surprisingly better than they might imagine by just seeing a bunch of rifles and an LMG shooting at them. So that's kind of nice. Love those. They also got a Navy Matelot squad, which is not on its own particularly great. It's basically just a bunch of rifle dudes, who are, naval dudes who got brought onto land. But they have the Shirker Special rule. So if you want really cheap dudes, you can take really cheap dudes, which is nice. And then they have an officer cadet squad, which is really interesting. It's an inexperienced section that starts with stubborn. So you're always making your morale checks to avoid fleeing the battlefield on 8s instead of being modified by pins, which, 8s aren't particularly great. But if you're inexperienced with pins, 8s is a lot better than whatever it is you're looking at, right? So there's that. And they have a secondary benefit, which is also kind of nice on an inexperienced squad, which is that for no extra points, all of these, because they're officer cadets that were all thrown into a squad, they always count as having an NCO because they're basically all non-commissioned officers who just haven't received their commissioning as non-commissioned officers, right? So because of that, these guys, they're all trying to be lieutenants. They're all going to act at least like a sergeant. And so you always have the benefit of having your NCO down to the very last man, which is kind of awesome. It ginks, it gimps the snipers of the world, which, whatever. But hey, it's nice to know that your inexperienced squad is not going to drop down to a permanent morale of 7, which is cool. Your regulars are also pretty great, actually. You get a pistol loader again on your regular infantry section, which is nice, so your LMG can fire a little more effectively. You have the Dragon Porte unit, which is basically a regular infantry section, except that it can take 2 LMGs instead of 1. Also, the Dragon Portes, or the Chasseurs, one of those, I think it was the Dragon Portes, I can't remember. They wore blue pants. So if you want to do some interesting, versions of your troops that have a little more color in them and not just do the same greens and browns and stuff that everybody else is doing, hey, you can add some blue. Isn't that nice? And then you've got regular cavalry. I generally tend to take cavalry at veteran just so that they live a little bit longer. But hey, if you want to save yourself some points, you can take them regular. You'll see that in our army list down below. And they got access to Senegalese Traleurs, which are just regular riflemen with tough fighters built in for an extra point. So if you want guys who are tough in close combat, if you want a really cheap assault unit, Senegalese Traleurs, the colonial forces have you covered. And then in the veterans category, they're really great, actually. You get Groupe Franc, which is basically their kind of early special forces, SAS sort of stuff, equivalent for France. The big thing here is you get access to a lot of submachine guns, which you don't generally get for actually a lot of the early war armies. Don't even get that. Even early war German units didn't have a whole lot of SMGs in every squad. These guys can take the NCO plus 3 extra dudes, so that's an awful lot of shots up close, which is really nice. And a lot of tough fighters, which is also really nice. You get veteran cavalry, which is great. Again, they cost more points, but they are quite useful. And then you have Moroccan Goumiers, which are basically just the veteran version of the Senegalese Traleurs. You get access to tough fighters for an extra point. So if you want even more durable assault units, you got cavalry and Moroccans, which are fantastic. And then they have some specialist infantry. So we have engineers, for example. And the engineers, you can take them a variety of veteran Cs. They can take the flamethrower. They can't take a lot of submachine guns. The NCO starts with a pistol. But other than that, you're not going to get any sort of tough fighters on the list. So they are, in that sense, very different from, American engineers, German pioneers, British engineers. They feel a lot more like Japanese engineers, is kind of what they feel like. But hey, flamethrower embedded in a squad, always nice. And you can take it as cheap as regular if you want to save yourself some points. You got the French Foreign Legion, which is your paratrooper style thing. They got stubborn rule, right? So, they kind of feel a lot like paratroopers. You don't get access to a lot of submachine guns. So stubborn is really nice on assault units because once you get in there and you take an objective, you can stay on it. can't really do a lot with assault, can't get a lot of tough fighters in this one, but hey, veterans at a point are veterans. That's nothing horrible. You got motorcycles. If you like motorcycles, you get access to motorcycles, so there's that. And they also get an intelligence squad, which you can pick up, where you can technically take it inexperienced, regular, or veteran. I would probably lean toward regular or veteran just for the special rule, and it means that they're slightly more expensive, but their NCO gets the ability, kind of the intel special abilities. So at the beginning of a turn, you can roll a dice, and on a 4+, which becomes a 5+ if you're inexperienced, or a 3+ if you're veteran, then you get to draw one of your dice out as the first dice on the turn, which is kind of awesome. I don't know that that's like game breaking, and it makes them quite expensive. I mean, it's like a 4-man squad that when starting at veteran is like 80 points, which is a lot. But hey, if you really, really want to go first, you can go first, which could be really good. And then for the team weapons, these are pretty great actually. And by great, I really mean they have basically just the same things we've been seeing from people. Medium machine gun, it's whatever. Everybody gets one of those. You got the mortar teams with both inexperienced and both light and medium mortars, and you can take them with any experience level. So you can take inexperienced mortar teams if you want. You get the anti-tank teams is the boys AT rifle, which is, I mean, it's good. It's serviceable as a pin generator. It'll remove infantry just fine. Not great against armor, not great against vehicles in general, but hey, you'll remove light armor. You remove light infantry, which is really nice. You got a sniper team. It's regular veteran, nothing special here. Flamethrower teams, nothing special here. And no specialized team weapons available to you. And then in the artillery section, this stuff is great. Your howitzers are good because you not only get a potential free medium artillery, because you shouldn't take a light one, and then you also get access to all of the others, ranked, inexperienced, or veteran. So plenty of options there. You have anti-tank guns, which are, I mean, they're pretty good. You only get the light and medium ones, so they're really big trap ones you aren't getting. And you could have one for free. And I'll kind of tip my hand a little bit as we head into 3rd edition on this. Part of the reason why you might consider doing this is because you actually don't get good anti-tank guns on your armored pieces or on your armored cars. So while tanks are generally a good way of dealing with enemy armor, you're looking at a lot of light AT guns and low velocity light AT guns for France. And so one might consider having one's armor in a specific place to kind of roll forward and kind of push an enemy in a specific direction. And that direction is toward your medium anti-tank gun. And if that's the case, the AT gun is going to do an awful lot better job of removing stuff, actually removing stuff as opposed to pinning stuff than your French armor is going to do. And if that's your strategy, then you could go about it. Now, technically, thanks to Lafleys having very strong, durable truck beds, I suppose, they do have ways to get larger anti-tank guns on their, your tank choice. But they are extremely fragile. They are not particularly survivable. They don't have recce or anything else like that to help them out. It's really dicey. And if I'm going to go with 1 wound on 6 or 3 wounds on 4, I'm going to take the 3 wounds on 4. So one could make the argument if your strategy requires you to actually remove enemy armor as opposed to just pinning enemy armor, if one has to have a medium anti-tank gun, which was generally not particularly great value in 2nd edition, having one for free means if he removes a single inexperienced infantryman, he's made his points back and more, right? There's still an opportunity cost for not taking a 2nd medium artillery, but at least one has that option. Okay. And then for anti-tank, their anti-aircraft guns are actually really good. You get a single light anti-aircraft gun with Hotchkiss, or you could take a double light autocannon, which is also really nice. So infantry shredders all around in case you need them. Pin generators potentially against vehicles if you like. No multiple rocket launchers, not particularly surprising. Not many people were using them in 1940. And with that, we come to armor, and this is where things get interesting. So before people start screwing me over in the comments, and rightly so, if that's your desire, I can understand why you feel the way you do. Credit where credit's due, the French come up with a lot of unique and interesting ideas that influence a lot of things afterwards, right? So as far back as World War I, the Renault FT-17 and the Renault FT-18, you've got yourself a turreted tank. First of its kind. Fair enough. That's a fantastic, fantastic thing. With the Samua and with other later designs, you start seeing sloped armor being done quite effectively that will later be used by everybody, even to modern day tanks. You still see sloped armor. Okay. And the result is you can get a good amount of durability and a good amount of thickness without having to put on nearly as much weight, which is awesome. You've got things like the Sharby 1. Sharby 1 was durable. It was a beast. It was designed to be taken at potentially any from any side. And it had both anti-infantry and anti-tank capabilities that were quite effective. I'm not gonna badmouth the Sharpie 1. It's a good tank. The Char 2C, fantastic tank, even if in real life it was way too big, did not work, had engine problems, required almost a dozen crew. Like, I mean, it was the definition of a land battleship, which is what originally they were trying to do, right? Like that was the original desire. And in bolt action, I got to give it to them. The Shark 2C is highly effective. Okay, whether it should be that effective or not from a historical standpoint, who cares? I like it. It's beautiful. I don't know if you can actually see it, but right behind me, I've got a Shark 2C. I'm gonna go grab him because I love this tank. This isn't my favorite tank. I'm an M3 League guy myself, which again, same concept, right? Just, 8-year-old draws a picture of a tank and says, this thing is awesome. And then there you go. Okay, but the Shark 2C has several things going for it. First of all, it's a monster, right? You don't know my dimensions, but this thing is over 7 inches long, which means, depending on how you're going, you can give a pretty good sized infantry section, possibly even two, a good amount of cover just by cutting them off from whatever it is that will be shooting at you. Secondly, this thing is tall. Again, you don't know my dimensions, but this thing stands over 2 inches, almost 3 inches tall, which means if the infantry are right behind it, it's not even just you're going to give heavy cover to the infantry section, it's very likely your opponent won't even see the infantry section, which means they can't shoot at them at all. You're sniper safe. If you're, say, like an engineer squad with a flamethrower team, you're safe from snipers, you're safe from loads of machine guns, you're very nicely protected from M3 DACA Stewards because an M3 DACA Steward is not going to penetrate a Shard 2C very likely. Like, you're doing great. And the most beautiful thing about it is all of these guns. You got a turret in the back with the machine gun that covers both of the sides and the rear. You get side sponson guns that can fire either to the side that they're attached to or forward. You have a forward-facing one, and then you have a fully 360 turreted light howitzer. That is 5 weapon systems, 4 of which can fire in more than one arc. That is insanely rare in bolt action. You're talking, a couple of Soviet design stuff, the T-28 to T-35 style of things. And like a couple of other things that have machine guns that can do that. But in general, like there's not a lot there that can say it doesn't matter where you are. If you're within 36 inches of this tank, you're going to be shot at by more than one device. That is very, very powerful. Okay. They also have the AMC. The AMC is not a particularly great tank, but it's a perfectly fine and serviceable light tank. It's got the guns that you would like. It has no negative special rules. I think personally it's worth it to just take one-man turret and take it slightly less expensive and take something like a Renault R40 or something like that instead. But the AMC, if you don't want any negative special rules, you don't want any drawbacks, there you go. It's a good, solid tank, okay? So to be clear, when I say that their tanks are average, it's because we're not rating them based on who has the best tanks in the game. They still wouldn't have the best tanks in the game. But instead, it's that you have a number of really good choices, and then you've got a bunch of really bad choices, and that's what we're ranking here. I know some people really like the Char D series tanks. They're very cheap. They're very cheap armor, and that is admittedly pretty nice. Especially in second edition when you only get one. Shardy is crap. I'm sorry, guys. It really is. Renault R Series tanks, as a general rule, they're crap. They're not worth it. Hotchkiss tanks, I'm sorry. They're crap. Okay, I wouldn't take any of these. I wouldn't take any of these. They're just a waste of time. They're distracting you from the stuff that you really want. To some extent, the Renault FT is honestly a distraction too, because for the amount of points you're paying, sure, it's good value, it's good quality, but it's going to get can opened pretty easily by a lot of stuff. And that means you wasted something that could have, for not too many points more, done a lot more work for you. Arguably, one of the Lafley tank destroyers, which we're going to talk about next, would be a better choice over the Renault FT, right? So it's a very mixed bag. In fact, I'd be willing to say France is kind of the definition of a mixed bag. There's so much stuff thrown in there, and some of it you could tell it was an interesting design for 1931, and it was an interesting design for 1935, and it was an interesting design in 1938, but it is not good enough by the time you get to World War II. When we start looking at the tank destroyers, they're fine. It's a lot of damage value 6 truck-mounted platforms. Sometimes they're forward-facing, oftentimes they're rear-facing, and they're typically light or medium AT guns, so you can get some pretty good firepower out of these. The biggest thing, of course, to remember is they're super soft, right? I mean, they are soft-skinned vehicles. They're very easily removed. In second edition, at least, you do still get to roll on the damage chart when you suffer damage. So you're not just immediately removed like you are in third edition, but it just means you are paying purely for firepower. It makes it very cheap firepower, but you are only paying for firepower. You have no resilience whatsoever. You should always have cover on you at all times with this thing. Okay. You don't get any self-propelled guns beyond the Sharpie 1, because technically I suppose one could consider the Sharpie 1 to be a self-propelled gun because it has a howitzer, but I think it more accurately fits in a tank, and I'm pretty sure Doctrine at the time counted it as a tank. I'm pretty sure. They didn't have any anti-aircraft platforms, at least none that we have here in the books. No specialized vehicles other than obviously you got these weird monstrosities like the Sharpie 1 and the Char 2C, but nothing else there. For tankettes, they really didn't do tankettes, probably because they were doing the Renault FT. That's my guess. And which, we classify as a proper tank. I personally would move it into the tankette section in second edition. It's not going to hurt anything. It just means you can run your Samua or your Sharpie 1 or your Char 2C alongside a Renault FT. That's all it is. It's not going to change anything. Your half tracks, honestly, are really darn bad. The Schneider P16, I'm sorry. It's a low velocity AT gun, which at that point, why the heck are you paying for a low velocity AT gun? Just buy something with a machine gun at that point. You're going to get more value out of it. It's very tall. It's as tall as a tank, even though it's only damage value 7. So, it's a liability from a cover perspective as to how tall it is and how hard it is to get full cover against things. It's half tracked, so yay, it's reasonably fast. It has a reasonable number of pivots. Like, I don't really know what else to give this thing, man. I feel like you can get a better option by taking a Renault FT18 with the same low velocity AT gun with the same armor value. That's about two-thirds of the height. And sure, it's slow. I mean, whatever. Like, it really doesn't matter generally. It's not going to make a dramatic difference. So I would save yourself some points and just take yourself a Renault FT18. That's what I would do. Anyway, moving on. We got the armored cars. Armored cars, honestly, in general, are pretty darn bad. You get two really good ones. Okay? You get the Panhard 178, which is basically a damage value 7 plus light tank. It's got your light AT gun with the coaxial MMG, but it also has recce. And we talked about this in the Free French video, but this thing is fantastic. So I don't want the score of poor to take away from the Panhard. I also don't want to take away from the Lafley S20 TL command vehicle, because this guy is really sick in that for super cheap, you can add a command vehicle. Now, you weren't required to take a command vehicle like you are in third edition, but if you wanted to have a really big morale bubble to help whatever else it is that you have, let's say you want to make sure your Sharpie 1 stays in the fight and just keeps shooting every single turn. This thing is a very cheap way of helping to make sure that happens. But I'm not going to lie, all of the others are horrible. Okay? They're all really bad. So, as sure, by weight of numbers, again, the whole mixed bag thing kicks in. From a car's perspective, not that great. But honestly, you don't have to take any of these. Panhard 178 is fantastic. If you really like command vehicles, go for it. But what you should probably be doing, honestly, is you should take the early war motorcycles that have the sidecar with the light machine gun or another weapon in it. And the reason why I mention this is twofold. First of all, just because for sure value, 35 points for a really zippy, recce light machine gun, which in second edition doesn't get half shots, is just fantastic. It's really fantastic. Second, because you can easily upgrade this. You can actually technically downgrade it. You can actually downgrade the light machine gun to a rifle for 10 points. I would never do that. 25 points is not worth it just to get a single rifle running around shooting at things. Especially since you're losing 3 shots for 10 points. I feel like there's something really wrong with that. But you can also upgrade it to have things like an AT rifle. You can add a light mortar. You can add a VB launcher because, of course, secret special rule, VB launchers, they appear everywhere. But the big thing that matters here is you get extra selection. So you can throw 3 of these into your list. You could add an AT rifle to one of these things, right? If you really wanted to, and just have guys mobily going around putting pins on armor and potentially getting around to those rear and flank attacks to get, to get really good shots off on them. Like there's a lot you can do with this. So on the whole, I'd skip over all of those things and just go motorcycles. That's what I would do. The second reason why I gotta mention the motorcycle specifically is that the first tournament that I went to was this tournament where I took first place. I took first place because it was designed to be favorable to inexperienced players. It was our first games, and we were jumping into bolt action for the first time. And it was my third, fourth, and fifth game that I'd ever played a bolt action. And I I won first place because the rules of the tournament was that the highest ranked inexperienced player would win first. And the guy that I lost to, the only loss I had one really big win, I had a close loss, and then I had a really big win. But the guy I lost to, his name is Ray. And Ray is a really good player. He came in third place in that tournament, which meant he should have come in second. And if the stats are correct from what I saw on the recap of that event, I think I did still come in third. Like just by sheer points, I would have come in third. But Ray beat me fair and square, and he did it primarily with 3 of these motorcycles. And I learned an important lesson that day about how hard it is to tackle recce units in mass and how easy it is to stack pins on vehicles, well, on people, especially those infantry Polish cavalry sections when you have 3 zippy light machine guns running around and then there's the rest of your army. Uh, it was it was a good lesson. It was a good lesson, and at that point, I was converted. Early war motorcycle, fantastic choice. You should take it. It beat me, so definitely give it a look. And then finally, looking at the tows and transports that they get. Honestly, this is probably the best transport section we've seen so far. And that's saying something because Belgium's is pretty good. First of all, your soft transports are phenomenal. You get the Lafley S20TL, which has 2 machine guns on it, while still being able to transport 10 dudes, and it's not that expensive. It's fantastic. You also still get the lowly truck, so like, if you just want to be able to carry lots of guys on the cheap, you can do that quite nicely. But this is phenomenal. You get, for only marginally more than a machine gun team, you get 2 machine guns, which again, no half shots in second edition, which is phenomenal. And it's still a troop caddy. It's still a battle taxi, right? I mean, it's super, it's soft skin battle taxi, so, be careful with the thing. But it means you can put some fire down range, which is phenomenal. Your armored carriers are fantastic. You get the Berlier, so, you get a light machine gun on a 7-man capacity, fully buttoned up, no top hatch carrier, which is fantastic. You've got the Lorraine 38, which is more open top, fair enough, but it can carry 8 dudes, because it's, but also, and this is the thing that you don't really see in the stats, but is important. It's a tractor that was used for like ammunition and stuff like that, but could also hold dudes, that has a trailer behind it, which means when you look at the actual model, the thing is really long. So if you just need cover that you can use to protect yourself, check out the transport series, see why cover is so important. You can do that for super cheap with a Lorraine 38 carrier. This thing is super cheap. And yet you get an armored carrier that can give you a whole lot of cover and protect a whole lot of guys, which is fantastic. And then if you just want an armored carrier for super cheap, you can take the Unic 5-man half track. So it's a half track, which means it gets a good amount of turns. It has 5-man capacity, and it's a very capable armored carrier in case you just need to get like an engineer section up, or you want to rush up a Dragon Porte unit with 2 light machine guns in it, right? And just drop them off really close up front so you're not getting those long range penalties to hit. All of that you can do quite nicely, and all of these are pretty good on a budget, which is fantastic. More on these later when we run our sample list. Gun transports are phenomenal because you get the Berlier, which is both a good source of light machine gun fire because it's not going to be pinned by small arms. You, of course, get the Lafley with the double shots, but you also get a 40-point regular Lafley S15 with the machine gun added. It starts at 25 points regular, and you can tack on a pintle-mounted machine gun for an extra 15 points, which means for less than the cost of a medium machine gun team, you can get a zippy machine gun with the same number of shots, admittedly, effectively possibly 1 wound on damage value 6. So the machine gun team might be more survivable if there's no snipers in the equation. But you can get that zipping around on wheels. So advanced order carries you 24 inches on a road, which is fantastic. And of course, as we highlight this, this also tells you partially, and you can begin to see why machine gun teams were not particularly great in second edition, because you've got transports that can do the job better for cheaper. It's a whole problem. Okay, your tows are great, mostly because you get horse-drawn limbers. And then you've got your gun toes, which you actually get some. I know it's taken us months to finally get here, but there are, in fact, toes that have guns on them in the game. And you get a 60 to 65 point version for France, which can have either a forward facing machine gun, or if you want to pay that extra 5 points to bump it up to 65, a 360-degree machine gun. And if that weren't the best thing, it's armored. So it's not going to be removed so easily. And this, fundamentally, is a really good set of tows and transports. I think this is the best set we've seen so far. So what are your choices? First of all, from an infantry perspective, you're spoiled. You get a lot of really good choices. It all depends on your style of play. There's a guy who plays locally. He plays France quite a bit. His name is Ryan. He's very good. I've had a chance to play against him. He really loves Group of Rang, which makes sense because the Group of Rang have a lot of submachine guns. They're very tough. They're veterans. They're really hard to dislodge from places, especially if you can get them into like dense terrain, heavy cover sort of stuff, ruins and things. They shoot up a lot in close combat. When they're right up next to you, they're really dangerous. And because you have a really good set of transports, getting them up to you is very, very easy to do. You get access to Foreign Legion if you like stubborn people. You get access to really cheap infantry. You get access to HE in all of your infantry sections if you want it. You get access to super cheap access to tough fighters. You get access to double light machine guns on squads if you want to play more of a backfield gun line style approach. Whatever you want, they got options for you. And pretty much every single infantry section has a purpose, which is really great. Love that. A+. You got mortars, you got flamethrower teams, you got AT rifle teams. All of those are really great. If you like snipers, go ahead and take them. Nothing particularly special here, but if you really want to, go ahead. You got howitzers, which are really good. You've got anti-aircraft guns, which are really good. Maybe you take a free medium AT gun because it would give you the ability to punch harder against armor. But on the whole, not bad. You got really reliable tanks. If nothing else, they got a lot of armor. You have, I think, the largest access to the armored all-around special rule with French tanks. So while I don't think armored all-around helps nearly as much with damage value 8 tanks, I do think it helps an awful lot with those damage value 9s. If you're going to be paying for a DV9 tank, you might as well make sure that people can't try to cheat you by outmaneuvering you. And so in that sense, pretty sweet. You get motorcycles. I'm not going to run those down. And of course, as we literally just said, great transports, great tows. So on the whole, the world's your oyster. You have a lot of things to choose from, except medium anti-tank guns on an armored chassis. So what would the list be? Here's what I would do. This is not a super optimized list, but it does help to showcase what you can do with France. What I would do is I would take a second lieutenant inexperienced. I'm going to take him with 6 engineers, the NCO having a pistol, and we add a flamethrower. We'll take those regular just to save some points. Those guys are going to be going in a Burlier, so that way we can drop off the flamethrower reliably because we'll have that extra +1 to morale. We're going to take 2 squads of 5-man Group of Rang with the 4 submachine guns. I generally would recommend these in groups of 6 or 7, but we're going to be putting both of these in the double machine gun Lafley S20TL. So because of that, I'm going to take them as squads of 5 because I didn't want to have to pay for 2 of those Lafleys because I just didn't have the points. We're going to take 2 squads of regular cavalry. I would generally run these at veteran, but I need the points elsewhere. So we'll just keep them at those, and that's fine. They have recce, so they'll survive for long enough before we can start getting to those softer, small teams that we can handle. And then we got the boys anti-tank rifle team just for some extra fire suppression and support. We'll accompany him with an inexperienced medium mortar. We'll accompany that with double medium artillery with spotters, one of which is free, sans the cost of the spotter. And we're going to go with the Char-2C because I'm sorry, I like the Char-2C. So I'm going to take it. And it's only 190 points regular for a damage value 9 vehicle, which is very difficult to crack open. So I'll take that. And then we're going to go with the triple early war motorcycles. I'm going to keep them all with the LMG sidecars just because I didn't feel like dropping stuff in order to make room for it. Again, short on points. And we got our 2 transports, bringing us to 999 points, 16 order dice. Not too shabby. And so in 3rd edition, what do we have so far? First of all, we still get a good mix of infantry. We didn't basically lose anything. We still got the cheap tough fighters access with our colonial troops. We've still got fast cavalry and motorcycles, though admittedly cavalry face a few more uphill fights than they did in 2nd edition. I think that's healthy for the game, just to make sure that it feels a little more like World War II instead of World War I. And then we've got better light machine guns because the LMGs are lower cost in points and they generally perform better, which is always nice. We don't get any free units anymore for special rules, which is fine, but there are now more reasons to take artillery observers because we get 2 strikes instead of 1. And because of the fact that you could take multiple rifle platoons potentially, or at least a rifle and a recce platoon, you can take more than 1. So you can maximize on your special rule arguably better than you could at least maximize on your free inexperienced squad because you're not having to take 3 free things in order to get another free thing that's not as valuable as some of the others maybe. Um, but yeah, I mean, on the whole, I think that's fine. I think it's fine as a solution. You get access to engineers and flamers still, which is nice to have. Not sure that it's worth it, to be completely honest, because flamethrowers they really took a beating in the new edition. So I mean, yay, you get access to them, go team. But I don't know that they're necessarily all that great. Your autocannon artillery section just got an awful lot better because your double autocannons with 4 shots, pen +2 against armor means you will reliably put pins down range, assuming you're not fighting veteran damage IU9. More on that in a little bit. But it does also mean that for infantry shredding, since you don't have to put all the 1-inch HE templates right next to each other, and you can split them up, your chance of doing substantial damage to infantry is fantastic. So because of that, I mean, I would contend autocannon artillery are fantastic now, and you should totally take a look at those. Oh, and of course, did I mention they got a points drop? They dropped down 35 points regular for those things, 65 points with the double version, which is phenomenal value. The other reason to think about it is that in your artillery section, you will probably find yourself doing a lot more of the heavy removal against more skew lists and reactionary sort of lists, where the person is looking at it and they're saying, okay, autocannons, AT rifles, light mortar spams. They're really looking for that pen +2. Pen +2 is the thing. So I'm going to take veteran damage value 9 vehicles and make it so they really got to work in order to get their value out of it. If that's the case, the nice thing about the artillery section for France now is you still do have access to those medium anti-tank guns if you want them. And they're not that expensive. They actually came down 5 points. They're 70 points now instead of 75, which is nice. But what that means, practically speaking, and this is the core, I think, behind it in my mind, is that you can take just 2 of these. You're not losing that much in terms of points, not really. And you can put them in different parts of the battlefield, so that way, whatever your armored tanks find is trying to stunt them, whatever your AT rifles are finding is trying to stunt them, you have an option to at least go and reliably put pins down range against enemy vehicles, if not actually open them up. It would be nice if you had something bigger. It was 1940. They didn't have very many things that were bigger. Most armies didn't have things that were much bigger. Technically, the Flak 88 is around at this point, but a lot of people are making do with 47 to 75 millimeter guns. They're not doing anything much bigger than that. So on the whole, it's the one problem that France has and part of the reason why they didn't crack into the top 5. But hey, you at least have the option and you can take more than one, which is great. You get access to the Laughley, which can be a super cheap command vehicle. You could run your command vehicle for your armored platoon at like 20 points if you really want to, which is fantastic. And you still get gun transports and tows, but they're cheaper and they're arguably better. Even though a lot of the soft skins are going to be more easily removed, the really good ones, a lot of those are armored. So you're not going to see that nearly as much, and the cost in general for them all went down, which is ace. Love that. And so on the whole, as I look at France going into 3rd edition, I think they can do okay. I don't think they're going to be like top table style stuff all the time, but I think they at least have options. And whatever your playstyle is, you can probably find something that you'll like with France. And now that we got plastic infantry instead of having to buy metal infantry, chef's kiss, fitting for France. But there are a couple of changes that I would recommend making. So in general, in terms of adding new stuff, I probably wouldn't add that much. I'm going to speculate here about Army of France because I suspect that the Army of France book is going to be the one that's going to follow the Armies of Italy book that's going to come out in Q2 of next year. And I'm going to speculate on what the 3 types could be that we could use, okay? Because I don't want to just do generic French army. I don't think that's quite correct to what we should do. I do think the French Foreign Legion is probably going to make an appearance just because, hey, +1 point for stubborn, take everybody veteran, right? Sort of stuff. We've been seeing that in basically every book so far. So I don't see a reason why we wouldn't see that here. And hey, French Foreign Legion, they look cool. They have a very cool history. They've been active even to the modern day, right? I mean, French Foreign Legion has done an awful lot over time. Why not honor them with a special subtype? I think that's great. I would also like to see like a Dragon Porte unit, which the Dragoon, it was a mounted up unit that could be easily dropped out. I believe that there was a difference between the Dragon Porte, which I think were half-track based, and the Chasseurs, which I believe were wheel transport based. But the point is that I would give them something similar to kind of the Panzer Grenadier special rule, right? Where they take less hits if they have to take wounds coming out of a transport. They find it easier to embark and disembark, that sort of thing. I think that would be really cool because I do like those mobility-centered rules. I like it when one is defensive, like stubborn. One is mobility-based, like this one. And then we do one that's offensive. I would just do a colonial forces style thing where anybody in the unit, you can purchase guys inexperienced to veteran, and anybody can pay +1 point to add tough fighters, which I think would be awesome because it means you can get really gnarly up close if you really have to, and there's a good reason to deter people from coming into combat with you. At the same time, it's not particularly overpowered because close combat is not overpowered in third edition. It's a real risk every single time, whether you're going on offense, even on defense. It's still pretty. It can be pretty risky. And because of the fact that you're re-rolling fails, it means that if you're fighting somebody who's using regulars and inexperienced troops, you're actually not going to get as much value out of tough fighters. You're only really going to get a lot of value out of that when you're fighting veterans. So I think those will make 3 very interesting special rules. I would look forward to seeing something new, something interesting thrown in there. It could be interesting to see like a VB launcher mortar team or something like that, maybe. Just because, again, like they get access to the VB launcher, and I believe VB launchers were sometimes used as smaller, basically mortar team style support weapons. So, could be interesting. Again, it just makes it feel a little special. Could also make for an interesting support team pack that they could release when they end up doing those sets, which is awesome. And then for the new special rules, here's what I would do. I would scrap the ones we currently have because I don't like them. I just don't like, one, the fact that they're so copy-paste, but two, I just think that they're lacking in inspiration. So here's what I would do. First of all, you're going to get 2 special rules, choice of a third, like we've been doing. The first one is called artillery focus, and this is going to be different from what we had with Belgium, and it's also going to be different from what we're going to see with Poland coming up soon in the series. The first one is that with artillery focus, we're trying to reflect the fact that French artillerists had a lot of training. A lot of training. That comes down to the fact that the primary plan for France was not offensive. The plan was defensive, which is part of why they didn't really develop self-propelled guns. They weren't intending to go on offense. A stationary piece is perfectly satisfactory for defense. And so because of that, they trained a lot with how to arc the shot and from very far away provide semi-reliable indirect fire support. And so I would make it so that French regular and veteran howitzers, not inexperienced howitzers, can reroll failed indirect fire hits. This does not range in twice in the same turn. So if you're ranging and looking for 6s, if you don't get it, you would pick it back up and you would look for 6s again. Okay. This is different from the Belgian rule. The Belgian rule, of course, was when firing direct fire, you get a bonus. This one is going to be indirect fire, which I think is awesome. And this kind of reflects the fact that, again, they really were relying on that for a lot of their suppression tools in ways that I think we could better represent within the game. And then we've got Maginot Line. Maginot Line, of course, is to reflect the fact that they were quite prolific in building up defenses. Admittedly, maybe they should have built them a little further. It was formidable. Germany intentionally did not try even to break through that. It just wasn't worthwhile. And so the way we would do this, if you purchase at least 1 or more defensive fortification in your list, which admittedly would require you to be playing with people who are totally cool with you purchasing these, I think we should move more toward that. I don't have a problem with that myself. I will highly encourage it if, talk it over with your group. But if you purchase at least 1, then you gain a choice of 2 barbed wire sections, 2 dragon's teeth sections, 1 gun pit, or 1 bunker for free. Okay? So you could purchase a set of, 1 piece of barbed wire and end up getting 2 more, and you could set up 3 sets of barbed wire. Very useful for stopping infantry, can be useful for stopping vehicles, all depends, and gives another reason for people to end up taking engineers, right? It could be that you're like, I'm taking all of these artillery pieces, I'm taking a lot of anti-tank guns, I don't know whether or not my opponent is going to have, is going to choose a side of the board so that I don't have a lot of cover wherever it is that I'm deploying. And so because we just don't know, one might be like, hey, I'm going to purchase a gun pit, and then I'm going to take a second gun pit, and I'm going to put 2 of my field guns in those just to make sure that they're safe, right? And that's an option. Or, you might just be like, hey, I'm going to purchase a set of barbed wire because I want to slow down some infantry or slow down some of those wheeled vehicles. And then I'm going to take a bunker for free because I feel like keeping my machine gun team safe or, something like that. You got options. And then for the choices, I would do one of the following thing. One is the fact that when the French were fighting, they tended to do quite well, especially in terms of moving forward and pushing the enemy when they were close to allies and felt like they had sufficient support. And so we'll give them a special rule that they get to add +1 to their morale when they're performing an advance or a run order within 6 inches of an allied unit. So this encourages you to kind of clump up, right? You can still split up just plenty, because even if you have 2 or 3 units, they'll all roughly be within 6 inches of each other when they're ready to make their moves, right? And so, you can do quite a bit with that. But it means that it does kind of encourage you to fight with your units working together. It's a combined arms style approach, which is very much what France did. And I think that's pretty cool. And the second option, if you don't want that, is you can just go with forward artillery doctrine, which is just the same as the get you by PDF. If you want the 2 shots on your artillery observer, that's great. By all means, feel free to take it. That's cool. And so that's the kind of stuff that I would change. On the whole, pretty happy. I mean, France is pretty cool. It's pretty fun. I'm personally more of a Belgian player myself for a lot of the technology that they have. But, I mean, I got to hand it to them. They got some cool looking tanks. They got some interesting concepts. They've got a lot of good infantry. They've got fantastic transports. Artillery section ain't bad. Like, they hit all the highlights. And that's part of the reason why they made it this high. The only real lacking place is that their vehicles can't punch heavy armor very well. And that's partially what's going to hold them back from that from moving higher up into the list. We're going to see a lot of nations as we start heading forward that can punch really, really hard against enemy armor while still punching hard against enemy infantry. But did I leave anything out? Was there a unit for France that you think got overlooked that should have been talked about? Am I being too hard on some of the tanks? Maybe they don't need to have guns bigger than a light AT gun. Whatever it is, please let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.